The entire contents of this podcast and website are based upon the opinions of Tammy Garcia and her guests, unless otherwise noted. The information on this podcast is not intended to replace a one-on-one relationship with a qualified healthcare professional and is not intended as medical advice. It is intended as a sharing of knowledge and information from the research and experience of Tammy Garcia and her guests. This is the Naturally Inspired Podcast, coming to you from our 1890 homestead in Johnstown, Colorado. I'm Tammy, and I want to thank you for joining us. Let's get started and help people feel good so they can do what they love for longer. Today on the Naturally Inspired Podcast, we have Susan Standfield joining us. She is the founder of the lifestyle brand Health and Justice. Susan lived in Africa for many years, where she became very familiar in dealing with corruption and advocating for human rights. She lives in British Columbia, Canada now, where she is calling for the dissolution of the BC NDP government because of its fraudulent handling of this pandemic. I hope you enjoy this episode number 42 with Susan Standfield. Well, thank you so much for being on the Naturally Inspired Podcast today, Sue. It's awesome to connect with you, a fellow Canadian and a fellow British Columbian at that, right?
Yeah, for sure. Well, it's a pleasure. It's always an honor to speak to people, especially women who are getting the stories out. So I really appreciate that.
So we always start off the podcast with getting to know our guests a little bit. So can you tell me a little bit about yourself? Where were you born and what was it like growing up, Susan?
Yeah, okay. Well, I was lucky. I grew up in the 1970s. I was a kid in the 70s, and I grew up, my father is a lawyer, and my mother is a very educated, she was a nurse and a banking executive. So I grew up in a household where intellectual debate was, par for the course around the dinner table. And that's a big reason why I am the way I am. We middle class family. My dad lost a lot of money in the 70s. We grew up in a very, what is now affluent part of Vancouver, but nobody really had any money back then. But I went to regular schools, bikes, skiing. My dad built ski cabins when I was a kid. So we got to do a lot of stuff, but it was a simple life. Then I got a degree, a double major in television and politics, which is probably why I do what I do.
Right, I guess so.
I worked in TV for many years for Americans in Vancouver, and then I moved to Africa, and I've been a human rights activist ever since in Africa and Canada, and I'm a mom now too.
Wow. What prompted you to move to Africa? How did that happen?
Well, my default joke, because I always like to joke about stuff, is I couldn't find anybody to marry me in Vancouver. Yeah, all my friends were getting married and buying houses, and it just wasn't working for me. So I had some time and I had some money, and I always wanted to live in Africa. I thought, I better go now. I'll go now. And then I just stayed. I stayed for 13 years.
Wow. What was your plan when you got there? What were you going to do?
I wanted to live in Nairobi because it's very English speaking, and I knew I could set up my life there.
Hang there. Yeah.
Yep. And I was riding the coattails of a successful social profit venture I created, and Hugh Jackman became involved. It was quite a high-profile deal. So I had some entree with diplomats, and I had some money, and I did the same thing there. I ran a design studio, because I'm a designer, where young people could kind of monetize their ideas, even though they didn't have education, and I would kind of help them do that. And so we would do projects with hotels and art galleries, and we made a TV show, and I was the one doing the business hustle, and then the young people were supplying their amazingly creative talent, and that's the work I love doing the most.
Awesome. When you say design, are you talking about interior design? Are you talking about clothing design, or just design all around the gamut?
Well, I always joke that I could probably design anything. I can design a sandwich, I can design a school. I think someone who is a designer, I'm not formally trained, but we're essentially problem solvers. So when our Columbia closed our schools, I was like, okay, I'm going to have to design a new school. And it's not like I'm just going to have to build it. I'm going to have to conceptualize it. I'm going to have to model
What does it look like?
Same way you would have to if you were going to do a school. So I just use the word design. And it's a great way to reach people. Design is, I always say, is the silent voice of justice.
Yeah. Well, creativity, right? I mean, I think creativity is light in darkness, period.
Yeah.
So,
Totally. And focus on that, right? Focus on the art, the creativity, and it's empowering because it makes you realize you can do something, even if it's little.
Right. Right. That's a really good point. So I want to get into this whole thing. I don't even know what to call it at this point, right? I mean, we're just
Yeah.
inundated with some new
Awakening.
crazy, yeah, the great awakening, right? I've heard
I'm
that
calling it
term.
the awakening. It's the
Yeah,
awakening.
I like it. I like it because
Yeah.
it's
The
definitely,
enlightenment, the new enlightenment.
yeah,
Yeah.
definitely
Well,
people
hey, I
are,
mean, I always see the silver lining. So
yeah,
I don't want this to happen, but let's make the most of it. And this is a way we can stop the tyranny faster than maybe having been dragged through it slowly for the next 20 years. Maybe we can stop it in the next 2 or 3 years.
that's a really good point. That's a really good point. So since March, take me along your journey because your life is completely different, right? Like your life has changed dramatically. So take me along your journey. What happened in March for you?
Well, my one of my oldest friends just randomly told me that his daughter had been sent a text message from her university, where I went, Queens in
Okay.
Ontario,
Okay.
and that her year was her year was over for the year, and they were all being sent home before spring break.
Okay.
And because I've studied the corruption of infectious diseases, that industry for 2 years, I
Yeah.
was like, and I'm an investigator, I'm a problem solver. I'm like, okay, so if 2 million students were told their years were over, that's not something that you do quickly by text message in a couple of days. That would
Right.
take months of planning.
Right.
That would take months of planning to make sure that
You're
2
right.
million students had everything sorted out to the end of June and everything was fine financially and all the Canadian universities. And I thought something doesn't add up. That must have started in January or February to get it all organized.
Okay.
Yeah, so I knew we were in for a big hit, and infectious diseases is full of corruption, so I just didn't know how big it was going to be. And then it all started happening as soon as Bonnie Henry, our public health officer, I don't
Yeah.
know if you guys are faced with them, as soon as she hit TV, because I have a TV background, I was like, here we go.
Right. So were you, able to predict the messages coming out?
Well, naively, because I'm not a mobilizer of movements. That's not has not been my activism. I've mostly designed projects that make money that create social change. We call it social profit in Vancouver.
Hmm.
And so I was kind of sitting around waiting for the activists to start and waiting for the protesters, right?
Right.
And I would go, but I've never been the organizer person.
Right.
And so I'm just sitting there waiting. I thought, okay, another day, another week, or whatever, and nothing happened. Nothing was happening. And I don't know if you remember this, what was happening just before Corona, like literally the month before. And nobody talks about this. This is probably the biggest story we need to start looking into. The Wet'suwet'en and Unistoten First Nations people of BC had
Uh,
shut down the country. And that
oh,
movement ended up on 5 continents within 2 weeks. Do you remember that one?
I don't. I didn't hear anything
Okay,
about it.
maybe, yeah, you mainstream news, who knows? But they literally had solidarity on 5 continents because it was a peasant revolution. You know, they're connected to the peasants, South America, Africa, Europe. They had support on 5 continents literally in 2 weeks because I study social movements and I was like,
Right.
that was the fastest social movement I've ever seen happen. And so that's what led into Corona. That was happening the month before Corona in
Interesting.
Canada. Yeah, and so I thought,
Interesting.
okay, well, the protesters will get out again, right? Nothing. Nothing happened for weeks. And I think it was my husband who might have said it. He's like, well, maybe it's your turn. Maybe you need to start this.
Right. Holy
I was
cow.
like, what do you mean?
Right? When it lands on your own doorstep like that, it's like, oh. So you decided
Yeah.
at some point to start speaking up about this. What were your first steps with that?
A friend of a friend said, help, this woman will help you organize protesters, because people who do this have huge groups and email lists and stuff, and they get
Right.
thousands of people out, but this isn't what I do. So I was
Right.
like, okay. So 20 people showed up to our first lawful protest march that I had talked to the police about before to do everything properly.
Okay.
And I thought, great, 20 people, no idea how big this scandal was, but
Right.
20 people, that's fine. Well, it turns out an independent journalist like you came And he put a video up, and over 3 million people saw our protest within 24 hours.
Oh,
Yeah, totally by accident. So, well, maybe not accident, but
right.
so we were on the map. Vancouver was on the map. I was on the map. I was getting death threats,
Oh
thousands
my
of
God.
messages immediately
From
because it was all
organizing a
connected.
was there a specific message with your march? Was it anti-mask? Was it the whole lockdown? What was your message?
It was me in like the mom standing there in my t-shirt saying, I believe this is public health fraud. So my message was huge, but I
Right.
didn't realize how big the corruption was going to be. I just thought, oh, a few little bylaws and messages and this will go away. I thought it was all going to go away in a few weeks.
Right. Ah, if it only had. Okay, so
Yeah. And then you get when you,
fast forward a
yeah,
little bit and you start trying to make decisions, right? Like we all are because they closed school, right? They closed school in BC. I'm assuming they closed it here in Colorado. So, we're all locked down. We're trying to flatten the curve, is what we're being told over here in the States. Were you getting that same message over there? Flatten the curve?
yeah, but I wasn't paying attention to it because I don't watch mainstream news.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew it was all fraud. So I was focused on the action. And because I'm more focused on legal action, the first thing I did was I sent an email to all the top officials in my kids' school board saying, do not close the schools. You have to open them again after spring break. You have
Right.
to give the children the right to education, and you have to give them the right to build natural herd immunity. So I
Yes.
walked into school at 9 o'clock in the morning, the day after spring break, which was April 30th or something. My principal was there, and I said, you have to open the school alone. I'm by myself because nobody's come. And that's a part of my type of activism and documenting that,
Okay.
doing these things and documenting them. They didn't listen to me. They refused to, whatever, right? You have to have evidence.
Right.
And he walked away from me and he went into his office and he shut his door. And I knew in that moment that the schools weren't safe anymore for children.
Yeah.
I thought, if he's going to treat me that way, and I'm the taxpayer, I'm the mother, God
Yeah.
help my children. They're never coming back into the system.
Yeah. That's a huge realization. I actually homeschool my kids, and I have for the last 3 years. I pulled them out 3 years ago. Same kind of realization happened. I was
Yeah.
speaking up about truths that were going on, and they were just being unheard. And I had the same realization, like, if you're not going to
Yeah.
listen to me, is my kid even safe here? Right?
Well, no. And we always do private stuff in Africa because I've mostly lived in Africa, private medical, private school, private everything.
Right.
And so this was my first experience with public education in Canada, and I've heard nightmare stories since. And there are lots of people trying to do a good job, obviously, but the
Yeah.
system is broken and it's too
Yes.
big and it's got uh, too much politics running, and it's not about the
Hmm.
children.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, definitely. I see that here for sure. So you decided my kids aren't coming back here, right? So that was when you started to
yeah,
kind of shift what you were doing. And did you start speaking out about the school message right away too from there?
yeah. Going back, what would I do? Would I do it differently? I think about that. It seemed, and I was talking to a lot of activists, and you probably feel the same. It seemed like there was like 700 things to do at once
Yeah.
because it wasn't just the school. Then it was the grocery stores. Then it
Right.
was the libraries. Like,
A
yeah, and I
food
found it hard.
shortage, or
To
there's all
Yeah, I
other
found it hard to
racial
stay focused.
relations. Like we're getting hammered all at once with all these issues.
Yeah, and they're all human rights violations, and so they all seem important. Now, so 5 months later, now I feel like I've really found my focus, which is empowering women to do their own small direct action legal advocacy, and I don't mean lawsuits.
Yeah.
And that's enough. Just that in itself is a lifetime of work, but we were all jumping from one thing to another to this and that, and every time I went somewhere, I was penalized or punished. But looking back, I think, okay, how would I do this differently? The moment that it all happened, I knew we were in for 6 months of people not knowing what's going on. I knew that
Right.
so few people would understand the corruption that exists in infectious diseases because I had studied it for 2 years and it's very specific and sciencey, and the average person has no idea. So I did
Yeah.
know. I was thinking
We're all
September,
over here
October.
trying to be Google doctors, trying to figure out what in the hell's going on, right? to the
Yeah.
average
And never
person.
before, I've never done activism where the media didn't help me. I've always done activism
Ah,
with subjects that the media wanted to get behind.
right.
Poverty, homelessness, Africa, women's rights. This is the first time that no media would talk to me. They wouldn't answer me. And I was like, wow, we don't have the media. Not only do we not have them, but we
They're
have to go
hurting us.
against
Yeah.
their lies. Yeah.
Yeah. When did you realize that you didn't have the media? What was it that triggered you to think, oh, they're not, they're going to actually be hurting the message here?
The moment I saw how organized it was for Bonnie Henry, our public health officer, to be on television every night. And I knew that would be a studio that had been built and set up,
Ah,
and that
okay.
all the cameras would be there. And this, they were in for a long run. It wasn't just randomly catching her outside her office door, right?
Right.
And I realized the media had been brought in to put out this message, and the Canadian media is very controlled in Canada, very corporate, and
Yep.
they're part of what I call kind of these cartels. And I thought they won't, as soon as they start spreading the word of corona, they won't go against it, because they will know that what they just said yesterday or a month ago will be exposed to be fraudulent. And so it's like what we'll talk about later, this belief system, where they're kind of sitting ducks now. They can't turn around and expose
Right.
the truth because they're culpable.
Right. Yeah, that's so true. I just talked about that in a post. Like, are we expected to wait for somebody to admit fault and walk that back? Because that comes with consequences, right? And they're going to be big
Yeah,
consequences because there's
it's happened in a couple of school situations. Like a school policy flipped really quickly within a day or two.
hmm,
So they were going to do one thing and then they changed to no masks or something. And so I see little things here and there, but I mean, these are some of the most powerful companies in the world, right?
yeah,
Like you've got CNN or whatever.
yeah,
They don't have any option to go, hey, sorry about that. We kind of messed up for the past 5 months. You know, we destroyed the economy of nations.
yeah,
So it's that they're just gonna. I think they're just gonna kind of water it down really, really slowly, hoping that it just people just
goes
accept
away.
it. But it's the opposite is going to be true. The next 6 months, we're going to see lawsuits, revolution, more anger, and then we're really in for a ride.
Yeah. Can you compare what's happened in terms of chain of events with your experiences abroad with this type of thing, where there seems to be like almost like a propaganda, like it's a drip campaign.
Yeah, what does that mean, drip?
Well, like in marketing, we say, it takes 7 times for someone to buy something, right? And so you
Okay.
send an email, you send the next email, you send the next email, you send the next thing, and that's what I feel like we're on. Every day
Yeah,
there's a new release, like a press release. Like
yeah,
yesterday to today, it seems to be all about we've got this vaccine. It's coming out November 1st. Get ready. It's unpatriotic to not take it, and previous days it was more on other wanted outcomes, but it's like a drip every day,
yeah,
and it's not an accident
yeah.
that every outlet is featuring the same thing, right?
Yeah, and that's the problem of the consolidation of the media. They literally are. Well, I'll tell you what the best example is, and it's a harsh example, but it is the best example. Most of my knowledge of these kinds of huge atrocities come out of Africa, because that's what I studied and lived in.
Yeah.
So in 1994, the reason why I moved to Africa was I studied Rwanda, and I'm a photographer, and I wanted to be a photojournalist. So I
Yeah.
studied Rwanda from a photojournalist standpoint. And if we look at British Columbia, we have 5 million people. And so that's kind of our jurisdiction. We're not really being persecuted federally, we're being persecuted provincially.
Right.
And so we have 5 million people. And in Rwanda, I don't know what their population was, but when the massacre happened, 1 million people were killed within 3 months. And they were killed by farm, what they call a scythe, an axe, a farm. It's for cutting plants. You
Yeah.
cut it, it's a big, huge farm knife, and you cut
Yeah.
the plant. So, so if that's the result, 1 million people were killed in Rwanda. Let's say 1 million or 2 million people's lives in British Columbia have been devastated.
Yeah.
And these are the parallels. Okay, so we've got Bonnie Henry and we've got the leader of the resistance forces there, the Hutu leader, because it was Hutu people who killed Tutsis.
Right.
Then we've got state radio. So they used state radio, and now that's what we have. We've got media, state broadcaster, as well as global and the privates.
Right.
And then we've got the trickle down effect, the daily propaganda, devastation after devastation. So people aren't being killed, obviously, here, and that's the brutal part of the analogy. But I would say at least 1 million or 2 million people's lives have been completely destroyed over 5 months. And that's exactly what Rwanda was.
Right.
Exactly, to a T. And it's funny, and it's the media, and it's this message, and it's how. And so those people, the Tutsis, who were the ruling class. They were the educated ruling class. 1 million of them were killed by the lower class, uneducated, less powerful people, and they were angry at them.
Right.
And so that's what's happening now. It's a group of people, a group of British Columbians turning on other British Columbians. And that's why people like you and I get yelled at by other citizens, because we're being turned on. And that's exactly how so many people were killed in Rwanda. The government didn't go around and kill people.
Right. They turned the people against each other.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's what Bonnie Henry is doing. These companies, she's threatening these companies that they will go out of business if they don't violate our rights.
Right. Right. I just read an article too about her saying that, she doesn't necessarily like peer pressure, but it works. Right. I found that pretty disgusting, because I'm making it a point to make sure that I ask people why they feel it's necessary to scold someone else because they're not following their set of ideology. Right. Because that's where we get into really a slippery slope, right? That's been done in history before, and the results were not good. Right. So
and then you add on to it. You add on to it that this is an industry that sees itself as immune, and I use that, as a pun. Mm-hmm. They see themselves as above the rest of the world. So it's not like the software industry would ever have the right to do this, because we can hold them accountable in stores and stuff like that, right?
Right.
The infectious disease industry and pandemics and viruses and vaccines are very, very removed. And these people, like Bonnie, they see themselves as smarter and kind of above the populations. And I lived in Nairobi for 5 years, and that's the center of infectious diseases in Africa. Right. And a lot of people I know worked in that industry. And the money that is there, spent on vehicles and lunches and their programs, and this is what they're running. They're running an industry that they really believe is too complicated and too smart for the average person to participate in. So we need to do it for everybody, even if they don't like it.
Right. We'll do your thinking for you.
Anybody in infectious diseases speaks like that.
Right. Right. So,
I mean, can you imagine getting away with that?
Yeah. Well, it just absolutely blows me away how Bill Gates can have his tentacles in every area of health, literally, and the media, right? I mean, he's not only, distributing his money through health, but he's also got his money in controlling the narrative, right? Because when your biggest donor is Bill Gates and your NPR, you're not going to be inclined to challenge his narrative.
Well, and the whole source of it, if you don't know, is when he was busted for his monopoly building, the court settlement was that he had to transfer his assets out of personal and Microsoft and all that and into philanthropic ventures. That was his punishment. And a lot of people don't know that. So he didn't change and go, oh, I should never have done that. He just moved his money into philanthropy and kept doing the exact same thing, and hired a very good public relations team to reposition him as the guy that's going to solve the health of the world. But he's doing the exact same thing in terms of monopolies. So it doesn't surprise me. And when I have a media background, as do you, when you got money and all the smartest people helping you, you can convince anybody of a story.
Yeah. Yeah. And you just keep saying it over and over and over again.
Yeah.
Right. That's the key. And how, so he's got exposure on all these different platforms. So not only is it being said over and over again, it's being said over and over again on multiple platforms in multiple industries.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And hey, the message sounds great, like save people from disease.
Right.
Like the message couldn't be better. Of course, everybody wants that message, but
Yeah.
it's just, again, it's because it's science. It's too far removed from the average person. That's one of the benefits, the silver lining of what's going on is more people, more lay people are starting to understand this industry.
Yeah. Yeah, and that actually that term just annoys me. When they get these slogans, right? They have all these propaganda slogans going on, and we believe in science. Well, which science is that? Is that the one based on Rockefeller's introduction of allopathic medicine? Is that one?
Yeah.
Because that one's built on a house of cards, right? I mean, so it becomes really hard to connect with someone that may not understand what's going on right now. And that's not to say that they don't have, I hate I hate to imply like, oh, you don't know what I know. Because what do I know, right? I'm just a normal person and I've had my experiences. Okay. And I have a certain skill set. I have knowledge about certain things, but um, I have that skill set and knowledge because of what I've been through. And it wasn't until I had a bad experience with allopathic medicine that I began to build my knowledge outside of it, to go searching for other things. And so my belief
Yeah.
system
And that's
changed.
always the case with it's always the case with justice and activism. 99.9% of the people, when they start pursuing justice, it's because they have personally experienced injustice and it changes them.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
So right now, we talked a little bit about how people are kind of being pitted up against each other. And how do we connect? Right? Because it is a difference in belief systems, is what we have here, right? We have a different
Well, I have
way of.
some good ideas. I have some very specific strategies, and I can share a couple with you
I would
because
love that.
these are the
Yeah.
things that are going to work. Yeah, okay. We have to shift our focus from social media to get out into the public. So
Hmm.
if you have 3 hours a day, well, 1 hour, 5 hours, however somebody's life is structured to dealing with this, because some of us it's work. That 80%, 60 to 80% of our time needs to now be out in the public talking to our neighbors.
Yes.
And yeah, and appealing to them in whatever way. Knock on doors, organize lunches, just do whatever, because we're way more likely to listen to someone when they not come to speak to us compassionately,
Right.
and less focus on social media. That's
Hmm.
a big one. And then the other one literally is a door knocking campaign that I designed based on Becky Bond. I don't know if you remember that name. She helped Bernie Sanders get some really big wins in his first election.
Okay.
And it's literally go around, if we each knocked on 100 doors in our community in the next month, 5 or 10 doors a night. Hi, my name is Susan. I want to give you some information. If we all did that, if 1,000 of us did that in Vancouver, we cover 100,000 people, and
Right.
just some nice informative info that's not confrontational from a neighbor. I want you to be educated. I want you to be able to protect yourself. That's a huge change. And so I encourage people, spend an hour once or twice a week doing that. It's a great way to build community anyway, meet some
Right.
neighbors, and it can't be censored. The trick is doing things that can't be censored. Piece of paper, knocking on somebody's door. People do listen. They love it. What's it called? Door knocked for the Green Party,
Hmm.
and people were very appreciative. It's not very often someone knocks on your door anymore, right? So
Right.
little things like that, yeah, in person, the old school, what I call old school activism. Be out there, not go into an office, hold somebody accountable. It's very hard to dismiss someone and shame someone when they're standing in front of you, and those are where our biggest wins are.
Yeah, I want to talk about that a little bit. So I watched one of your videos the other day, how you had gone into No Frills, which is the grocery chain that's close to you, and that was a really empowering video because you explained step by step exactly what you did, and I think that all of us that are feeling like this isn't right, but what do we do, right? So can you run me
Yeah.
through that exactly what you did there?
Yeah, okay, and I'll tell you, I learned this trick on the streets of Nairobi when I would be pulled over by cops who were harassing me in order to get a bribe. And that's what they do. And in
Right,
Africa, you pay a lot of bribe just to get through stuff, and it's really just a different form of taxation in a way. So you pay it, right? $10 here, $20 there.
right.
Um, And so I said to my friend, I go, this really irks me. What do I do? She was a local Kenyan. And she goes, this is what you do. You ask to see their badge number because they have to wear their badge number by law.
Uh-huh.
And you ask to write down their badge number and their name, and they'll let you go. And I was like, okay. So I started doing that. And sure enough, as soon as I did it the first time, he was like, you can go. Because that threat, that corruption disappears immediately when accountability shows up. So that's what I do. That's what I learned it. And I thought with No Frills, I'm going to approach this very calmly and patiently and give myself a few weeks to figure this out. I'm not just going to yell and scream because I'm pissed off. I don't even really shop there. I wanted to do it for my husband. And so I knew exactly what it was. I had worked for the company. I know how the corporate management structure is, the people, the labor. And I knew I had to speak to the owner of the store and that he would be there at some point. I'd get him to come in and speak to me. And I would have that conversation. You tell me this, I know this is not mandatory. Am I correct? And for sure enough, within 15 seconds, he said, it's not mandatory, it's voluntary. And I had that answer in less than a minute standing in front of him.
See, that's so fascinating. So like, why is it called a mandate? They're telling everyone it's a mandate. It's mandatory. It's a bylaw.
Yeah.
Is that not true?
Well, it's what they've cooked up. Yeah, no, it's not true at all. It's what they've cooked up in these meetings, this whole infectious disease industry. And they use this all the time, controlling populations, surveillancing the populations. That's what public health is. And it will be all over their websites. It's no secret. They seek to surveillance and control populations for the benefit of us, right? That's what the theory of public
for
health
our own
is based
safety.
on.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so controlling and surveillancing is very much embedded in this industry and has been for 50 years. And that's what Bonnie Henry, our public health officer, is. She's an expert at that. She was hired to be the pandemic expert during the Olympics. So there are specialists at this, and there's systems, and she designs the systems. That's mostly what she's doing, is she's designing these systems of tyranny for us. So the word mandate is not by accident. It's being used because it's being put out in these pandemic preparedness plans. And the companies are either going for it out of courtesy, or they may be being financially incentivized to do it. That's the big question.
Mm.
Is somebody paying them to do this to us? And I don't know whether we will ever get that answer. That's pretty tough investigative work, but it may be the case.
Right. So when you were at the grocery store, you saw all the signs out front, right, that said mandate. They're very intimidating signs. They're all over out here too. Must wear a mask to enter. And you decided to go in and you took a card and you had some pretty specific language that you said when you asked to talk to. Yeah. And that's important, I think.
For sure. Yeah. And that's, again, knowing the corporate structure of this company, but it exists with any business or any organization. There will be a boss. You got to get right to the boss as fast as you can. But the very first step, and I'll say this beforehand, is before you walk in that door, you have to believe, like I believe, and maybe you believe, that I have the right to do what I want and to live my life. And that's where a lot of people are in the gray area right now, because they actually haven't made that decision yet. They're on the, well, am I allowed to? If the government tells me this, and David Icke speaks about this a lot. I don't know if you watch his stuff, and that's why I call what's going now on the Great Enlightenment. It is the awakening. It's the stirring of the public to rediscover their human rights. And once you're in that mindset, which I've been in for 20 years, then you're able to map out, okay, what are the little details I need to cover? Because I'm already there. I'm not going in to ask permission. I'm going in to get facts and to hold people accountable. So the basics are, you always start, there's the door guy, and then there's the cashier gal, then there's the floor manager. And I feel sorry for them. They don't know what they're being asked to do. It's awful for them.
Yeah, so and it seems to me that they put the weakest people out front. Like here, they're putting maybe their emotionally challenged people that work at Walmart out front to police that.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. Oh God, that's a whole other thing.
Yeah.
Well, the piece that I found at No Frills, which was interesting, is like it's over the top at No Frills, which I started laughing at. I was like, they've even blocked the road. They've blocked traffic to do this. I've never seen before. And so the owner told me, he goes, well, I'll have to talk to the private security guy because he's not supposed to do that. And I said, that's private security? And he goes, yeah, that's not my company. That's a private security company. And I was like, so who's paying the private security company? A grocery company can't afford to pay a private security company. They don't even bag your food. You got to do that yourself now,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So where's all this money coming from? And to me, I can see it visibly. And also being a photographer, I think, for so many years, and that's a great reason to photo document stuff. You can look at the photographs later, and all
Hmm.
the evidence is there.
Right.
Who are all these players, and how do they piece together? So my best advice to people is be super respectful with the staff, because this is not about them, and they're just
At
being
all.
told
Yeah.
what to do.
Hmm.
As soon as you speak to a person who is actually accountable,
Hmm.
they let you do whatever you want, because they know that they don't have any right.
That's so fascinating. And we don't
And
know.
so this is what 3 companies have now told me.
Three.
Basically, TransLink, yeah, so TransLink is our big transit network,
Hmm.
the woman in the office, No Frills, and Walmart. And 2 days ago, the Walmart manager of the store on Holiday Ice, she said, "Yeah, no, it's voluntary. We're just being told to do this." I'm sitting in her office, and my kids were outside, so I didn't have enough time, but it's all the same pattern. That's why I'm trying to do direct action legal with women, is it's all the same pattern. There is
Right.
no mandate. It's fake. It's false. It's a
Wow.
word on a sign, and most people are complying.
Yeah. How did you get to this point? You talk about, and I am a big fan of David Icke. He's actually coming on my podcast next week. So I'm super excited.
No way. Oh, you
Yeah.
have to say hi to Gareth. I know his son Gareth.
Oh, do you? um,
Great. Yeah.
and when he talks about individualism, that is such a powerful message that I think especially women,
Yeah.
I mean, everybody, I talk about this with my son and my daughter, but especially with women, individualism is your right. It is your right. And to not explore your individualism or feel like you don't deserve it is you're stopping your purpose.
And we've lost that in Canada. We've been told that if you feel that way about things, that you're bad or you're harming others, that it's about the group. Like
That's
I
right.
said on a comment on social media the other day, I don't like using bathrooms if they're transgender. I don't like to be in the bathroom with men.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
just said that as my own personal opinion. And someone called me transphobic. I'm like,
Right. Yeah.
no, I just have a personal belief. I like to be in bathrooms with women. So in Canada in particular, I think the individualism must be on a low scale. I'd be interested to hear what David has to say about that, about Canada.
Yeah, and I couldn't agree with you more. Like why it seems like right now there's a push to funnel people into groups. And I feel like I don't care what your message is at this point. I'm I I'm just resisting group think here because there's slogans involved. There's backing that's very questionable. We've seen all kinds of motive that doesn't add up, right? There's a lot of money in
Yeah.
some of these groups, and it just doesn't add up to the face of the group. So
Yeah.
I just think, like, how do we give people permission to be an individual and to really be like, I do deserve to live my life the way I want to, especially when it comes to health. How have we
Yeah.
gotten
I think the
so far
answer, and we
away?
were talking, yeah, I think the answer, like what we were talking about before, is you have to, it's that theory of in the courtroom, the shadow of the doubt. You have to plant, and it can be the tiniest little thing. And this is advertising, which is my background. You have to give people a tiny little spark of a question. You just ask them one question in one moment during one day that makes them go, "Oh, I never thought about it that way.
Right.
Oh, wow." And so that's why the anger and the fights and all that, that's not working for us. We have to be more patient. We have to raise our energy around this. I had a meeting with someone who's really involved with what I'm doing. He's like, "Sue, you have to raise your energetic level and lift people up to this next place to get people to think again." And that's what David does so well, right? But
Yes, to think
the answer to
again.
your question is, I don't know, but your question is the right question. How do we do that? And it is all about thinking. We need to get people thinking again.
Right. Critical thinking is key, especially when there's so much information out there, right? There's all this information, but we have to take it in chunks almost because it's almost like we haven't been doing our own thinking for so long. We've just had this kind of fast food model of taking in information where you
Yeah.
turn on the TV, take it in, and okay, I know it. And that's not thinking, is it?
Well, and this is why I use fashion and design and women, and I do a lot of photographs, and I use myself a lot in the images just because I'm here and I have myself as the model. But the principles of advertising and marketing, as you know, work. And so
Right.
the more of us start using those tools and provoking people wherever we can, knocking on their
Right.
door or on social media, putting something on their window shield, to be influenced by a message and idea to make them start to be curious into their own life, then that's an unstoppable army. When somebody starts to ask questions themselves, you can't stop that person, and that's what we need.
Right. That's so true. So when we see the message that says that the mask is a mandate on the board right in front of our face, um, how can you explain to someone, or how would you pique their interest in that is fraudulent? That is not true. How would you do that?
Well, what I think works, and not everybody agrees with me, but I think it's the fastest way, is you have to employ the same dirty tactics. So I'm used to being involved with activism that is much harsher in Africa than it is here because of the problems, things like war, right? Working in
Sure,
war.
the stakes are bigger.
And
Hmm.
well, yeah, and it's like and lives are really at stake, right?
Yeah.
So, or poverty. I worked in dire poverty in Vancouver. And so you have to um, resort to using the tactics that they use. So in my neighborhood, in a forest, Bonnie Henry's put up this big sign of a black cat that looks really scary, and the black cat is 2 meters long. So it represents the amount of space that you have to have between you and a person when you're walking in the forest. And it's really awful, and it's mean spirited marketing. And
Hmm.
unfortunately, we need to do some of those things too, not necessarily to be mean, but we have to be that powerful in the
Right.
marketing. So when I see some of these images, you
Jarring.
may have, yeah, when it was an image of a woman wearing a mask, and I just put big bold letters over top, slavery. And people go, "Oh, that's so shocking. I can't believe you would say that." But it makes people think, and the less words, the better. The more
Right.
images we can use, and it makes them go, mask, slavery, mask, slavery. And you're
Right.
kind of working on their thought process in the same way these people who are trying to control us are. And it
Right.
will work if the media was on our side. This would have been over months ago, right?
And what does that
That's
say
our
about
biggest
how,
hurdle.
yeah, what does that say about our influence? And
Yeah.
not only is it just the media, but it's all these iconic figures that we look up to. Like some people have said, like, I can't believe, this famous person has turned out to be this. It's such a, not only are we having to kind of
Yeah,
like,
but
right?
I tell you a story about that. It does not surprise me because remember Hollywood, if you're talking about kind of Hollywood, that
Yeah.
world,
Yeah.
Hollywood protected Harvey Weinstein for 30 years.
Yes.
Everybody knew what Harvey was doing. Nobody said anything because they all wanted that money, the power, the jobs. They didn't want to risk it.
Right.
And it was really only because one person, the watershed news story, Ronan Farrow and Rose McGowan, came
Yep.
out, and then everybody bailed and attacked Harvey. So we
Yep.
cannot expect justice to come out of Hollywood.
No.
Forget it.
No, and
No.
so very
Even
early
Jennifer
on.
Aniston was wearing that.
Yes!
Yeah.
Oh, see, like, that
Right?
it's so irritating that they take these key players and they use them to
Yeah.
spread their message. And, people need to change, in my opinion, people need to change the way they view these Hollywood stars, because they're just employees. We look at them like they're
Yeah.
they're
For
they're
sure.
they're famous and they're so rich and this and whatever, but you know what? They are employees. They sign
Yeah.
up for that.
Yeah. And like I said earlier, getting people outside again. When somebody goes out to a public event, a
Mhm.
justice event, a march or whatever it is, that person changes. That isn't something that you just take lightly and you go back to your normal life. And
Right.
so getting people out of their houses and to witness in humanitarian work, where I started in West Africa in the Blood Diamond War, that's where I was trained. We call it témoignage, which is a French word, which means to bear witness.
Mm.
And that is basically the first building block of justice, is we have to witness. When we witness something, then we can understand it, and then we can advocate. So the witnessing is very important.
Yeah.
And we can focus on that. That could be another good tool, is getting more people just to bear witness. to
Hmm.
these injustices,
Yeah.
because it changes somebody. They may not speak out or talk about it on social
Right.
media, but their ideas will start to shift, and they'll start asking themselves those questions we talked about.
Yeah. Yeah. So with what you're doing and the movement that you're creating, you're actually asking, you're calling for the resignation of Bonnie Henry and the BC NDP party, correct?
Yeah, that press release has gone out, and it's about to go out now to 4 really small independent channels, which you may agree with is a great way to start, because the small publications, the story can move up from there.
Yep.
Well, specifically, I'm demanding the dissolution. So that's the word, the dissolution, the immediate dissolution of the government, which is a real citizens tool. This is a
Uh-huh.
tool that citizens have. With enough of
Yes.
us, we can actually dissolve our government in British Columbia. It
Yep.
works that way.
Yep. Well, your
And I want
government
to
is not
permanent.
currently sitting, right?
Oh, who the hell knows what they're doing? Yeah, they were, but in August, yeah, in August, I don't think they do. They did for a while, and I don't think they do in August, and they're supposed to go back in September. So there's no negotiating anymore in my mind. That this
Yeah.
government has to be dissolved. They've destroyed the economy. They don't have the right to rule anymore, or the right to
Hmm.
govern, I should say, not rule. They don't
Right.
have the right anymore. So I'm trying to start that, and we only need, 5-7% of the population to agree. But with Bonnie, what I am demanding is the complete abolishment of the public health office in British
Mhm.
Columbia, because it is the source of this corruption. It's not elected, it's
Yep.
appointed. It's heavily involved with the pharmaceutical industry, and we
Mhm.
don't need it. It only started 20 years ago.
Right. Oh,
It's
that's
new.
interesting. That's
Yeah, we don't
interesting.
need it. Like, we should be able to figure out our health management with all these other tools that taxpayers pay for and through elected things. And she's the first infectious disease specialist that's running, and we shouldn't have an infectious disease specialist because we don't have disease outbreaks in BC. If anything,
Right.
we should have a cancer specialist. We should have a
Right.
stroke specialist. So
Right.
we've got the wrong person doing
Right.
the wrong kind of job, and the whole office needs to be dismantled and defunded, as far as I'm concerned.
Right. Do you know Bonnie Henry's history with that?
Yeah.
Yeah. She comes
I know
from,
her history a lot. Yeah, do
like, I'm
you as
just
well?
wondering, have we always had has she always been there? Because obviously she's a household name now to most Canadians, but and I want to talk about that too, the fact how she's been just absolutely, glorified with awards.
Yeah, so that's a very expensive public relations campaign, right? That's what's
Mhm.
going on there. And there's money, and that's what's happening. Bonnie Henry is being positioned,
Mhm.
very, very professionally by the government.
Mhm.
They do that. They're not stupid. Of course, they're doing that.
Right.
But she actually has a military background, and that makes sense for vaccines because they're injected biologics, and they've been sort of born out of the world of the military. So she has a
Yep.
military background.
Yep.
And then she has pandemic experience in Africa. But I think the big reason why she was probably chosen for the PHO, and she took that position in 2018, was she ran the pandemic kind of model to design pandemic preparedness for the Olympics in 2010, which Vancouver hosted.
Right.
And I think everybody noticed her then, and she sort of became um, a leader, a thought leader. And not that she doesn't know what she's doing; she's obviously very good at what she does. But the big thing that she started getting involved with was she is the architect of the Canadian pandemic preparedness plan, and so she is the architect of everything that is going on. She has designed this whole system from the number of feet between desks in classrooms
Right.
to things that are going on in grocery stores. Her and her office and her 20 years of expertise is leading this. That's why she has to go. She just
Mhm.
has to get off television because we're never going to have freedom as long as she's on television.
Wow. Wow.
And that's a pretty easy thing to do. Like, that's one person. You just get rid of one person. Literally, everybody could go back to their lives because they wouldn't be being bossed around anymore. you know,
Yeah,
it was interesting.
except there's
They
one
kind of
tiny
turned against
problem.
Bonnie.
There's one
Someone,
tiny
something
problem.
turned against Bonnie in the media for the first time.
Oh, they have?
Oh yeah, yeah, big time. Yeah,
Oh, okay. Because like,
you didn't see the
my und
story?
I haven't heard that story, but I was gonna say there's one tiny problem, and that's that almost every Canadian, that I see on my Facebook feed is glorifying Bonnie and thinks she's the greatest thing since sliced bread.
Well, the person who did it, it's going to be interesting to see if this turns into a bit of a fight. And I don't know enough about the politics of unions to know this, but it was the head of the teachers union in British Columbia. And so that's got to be a pretty powerful job because there's 40,000 teachers.
Yep.
And she lambasted her because she appeared in an ad that showed a false representation of the classroom. And it wasn't so much that she criticized her for that, but she really exposed the fact that Bonnie's involved with high-level public relations propaganda.
Yes. Yes. And
That's what that was. And
Fauci
she
is
looked like
over
a teacher.
here. Fauci is over
Yeah.
here. I could send you this little video, this little propaganda video he's done that's with a cartoon that's being distributed through schools and teaches children that, you know, they're
Yeah.
carriers that are going to basically kill their grandparents and the people they love.
Yeah, that's the other campaign that I designed for the last year to give to the mayor, the minister of health, every high level health official in April, but then the pandemic hit, so I had to shelve it for a while. And it's a formal complaint that I've assembled with about 10 pieces of real evidence showing that the school system is being pharmaceuticalized because my children are
Yes.
recipients of it. And as a
Yep.
parent,
Yep.
and it will go to all of those people in October with a pattern of evidence showing that laws are being broken in order for the pharmaceutical industry to penetrate the school system. And Bonnie Henry's name is all over it.
Wow. That's
So will
fascinating.
they listen? Who's going to listen? That's the question. How
Yeah.
do we get more people to listen and go, that's not fair, because it's very blatant that it's illegal. Two principals even told me that what's happening is illegal.
Wow. And was there something specific that you can pinpoint that you feel like, you know, is the mark of the
Yeah.
pharmaceutical
Two
company?
things. Two things. There is fraudulent vaccine information being given out in the schools that say vaccines are safe.
Yep.
Okay. So
Mhm.
everybody sees that everywhere. That's fraud.
Yeah.
That is public fraud because that's not the whole story. They may be safe, they may not be safe. So our health authority is manufacturing fraudulent information to parents.
Mhm.
And then the second thing was my 6-year-old came home one day and in her backpack was a coloring book from a pharmaceutical company. It was branded by, and I said, this is illegal. And the principal said, yes, you're right, that's illegal. And I said, what is this? And she said, well, 4 pharmaceutical students were in your child's classroom the other day and they gave out coloring books. And if the coloring book is completed, they go to the pharmacy and they get a toy. And I said,
Whoa.
this is organized crime. I can't believe you're allowing this in the school. And she goes, well, it was a mistake. We're sorry. So that's a part of it. I go home and I Google this company. They're an Israeli-based company, and they are being sued by 40 American states for fraud.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, like, so this isn't just like a nice little company. This is a bad company
Yeah.
in my kid's backpack, inside Vancouver schools. Like, it's so high-level organized crime.
Yeah.
It's most people can't even believe it's going on, but that's
Well,
what it is.
that's the problem. That's the problem
Yeah.
right there. It's so blatant and so unbelievable that people don't believe it,
Yeah.
right? I
And
mean,
the biggest part is, and maybe we talked about this earlier, is that, well, even if all this bad stuff is happening, we have to save lives. Like, so the woman who works in the cafeteria, she was there during the vaccine clinic last year, and I said, oh, is the clinic finished? I walked by the room and she goes, yeah, and all the kids survived. And she kind of laughed. And she expected me to laugh too. And I said, that's a very unusual thing for you to say.
yeah.
And she got really nervous and she went and she reported me to the principal who came and talked to me. And that's how insidious it is. Like,
Yeah.
everybody kind of knows there's risks in this industry and everybody's kind of not talking about it. And that's the Harvey
Right.
Weinstein analogy. Everybody knew, nobody spoke out.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's a hard truth to learn when you're affected by it. Right? It's a hard truth to learn when you've been personally affected by it. And then to have people deny it on top of that is even harder.
Yeah, and so for people like me, it's like, ugh, another day of this stuff. But like, it's what you mentioned before when the notes that you sent down to me about the belief system,
Mm-hmm.
as long as people keep believing in one belief system, they will just not open their mind to another. And that's all about humility, and being humble and going, oh, teach me, educate me,
Yeah.
asking a question, being curious. And
Yeah.
that's really where the big wins will be, is getting people to start to question their own beliefs. And I think that David is probably the foremost person in the world right now who talks about that, don't you think?
I do. Yes, I definitely do. And his turnout this past weekend with the protests was phenomenal, right? I mean,
Yeah.
people are waking up, like you said. It's an awakening, and people are wakening up or waking up, and it really does come back to that individualism, right? Like believing that you have the right to think your own thoughts, and that you have the right to be who you feel you should be. Period. You're born
Yeah,
with
and
the
just
sovereign
reducing the
right.
size of the and reducing the size of these governments, that's a big part of it too, because
Yeah.
I'm happy to give up a few little rights and freedoms here and there to build
Yeah.
a great society.
Yep.
I'll park where I need to, I'll pay for the parking,
Yeah. Yeah.
I'll follow a
Keep the
few things
roads
because it's a
going.
contract.
Yep.
Yeah, it's a common law belief system, right?
Yeah.
But the size of these governments, oh my God, they're so big. And the older generations talk. We have a lot to learn from the older generations, because they they can see the escalation and the bloating, whereas people who are in their 20s and 30s, they never saw smaller governments.
That's right. And that's the scary thing too. Like I was talking to my husband the other night, like the kids that are being born today, they're never going to know and experience what we knew, like in the 80s, growing up in the
I
80s.
know, except except my kids and maybe your kids, because I'm, oh my God, I got yelled at because I said this is a violation of my rights. Somebody was trying to mask me, just trying to get some shoes for my kid in a secondhand store on holiday because he left his shoes at the river.
Right.
And the woman's like this, and someone walked by me and says, "You're disgusting," and that whole stuff. And I just like, "Okay, kids, we got to get out of here." And I looked at them and I felt bad. And I said, "I'm really sorry. I shouldn't have done this when you were with me. I normally
Right.
do my activism without them." And
Yeah.
my son looks at me and he goes, "Mom, you're awesome." I was like, "Thank you." He gets it, and that's what I'm teaching him, and that's why they're not going
Yeah.
back to school right
Yeah.
away. I'm so proud of you. That's so great. You're a homeschool mom. You're my hero.
Yeah, it's been a journey for sure, but I had the greatest piece of confirmation the other night when I was sitting downstairs late at night talking to my son, and then he said that maybe at first, Mom, what I didn't know what to expect, and I thought maybe at first it wasn't the right thing, but I'll tell you, this is probably the best thing that could have ever happened to me because of all the different friends
Oh,
he has because of his community involvement, right? So we're
right.
not normally home based 100%. He's in, mixed martial arts training with professional mixed martial arts practitioners. He's in the career
Yeah.
development center. He's all over. So he has this great circle of totally different people,
Yeah.
and he understands that that's really shaped him differently than if he had just stayed in a regular school. So
Yeah.
it,
Well,
it's
so this is the other reason, if you've asked this question or not, I'll tell you why I started the marches and why I have a specific focus is
yeah.
my family was devastated financially by this. And we were already just kind of on the edge. We had moved back from Africa. We don't have a home and a whole bunch of savings. Oh, whoops, the kids and my husband are here. I just needed a little bit more time. Okay, yeah. Um, and so as soon as Bonnie Henry hit the television, our income dropped by 80%, like
Oh,
literally within
what
a
were you
week.
doing?
Projects put on. Well, we have a small business consultancy,
Okay.
and 4 clients put projects on hold, and 1 went
Oh.
bankrupt.
Oh.
So we make between 10 and 12,000 a month. We went down to 2,000 a
Whoa.
month, and
Whoa.
2 kids on the west side of Vancouver, and we don't have an
Yeah.
expensive life, but living, and so I can't afford right now for my children to be in any camps or anything. I just don't have the money for that, and
Yeah.
I've chosen not to borrow and go into more debt or whatever, right? I
Right.
just thought, well,
Right.
I'll just figure this out. So I have to be that person. So what I'm doing every day to fight this is also a way to rebuild our family income. I
Yeah.
have to fight this in order for our work to come back again. And
Right.
one of my friends doesn't understand this. And I said, well, you work for the government. You haven't
Right.
had, you're not affected by this. You don't have children. You don't use public schools and swimming pools and libraries to take out your library books to save money and stuff. So of course you're not affected. You wouldn't come out and protest. You
Right.
can't understand what it's like for a
Right.
family like me. I'm awake every single night, stressed out, whether what's going on with my children. Oh, we can't afford to do that. We're on a family holiday. We only have $500 to spend, right?
Yeah.
4 of them for 7 days. And that's hard, but it's good lessons for the children to learn for a short
Yeah.
period of time. It's some silver linings there, but it's why I started the marches, because I thought I can sit here and be a victim, or I can get out there and change it.
Right. Right. And that's such a good point you brought up, because, the elite aren't being affected by this. And that should throw up a red flag for the
Profiting.
average. Yes. That should throw up a
Yeah.
red flag for the
And I knew
average
that
person.
when the hair salons closed.
Right.
I knew that when they closed the hair salons. I thought, oh my God, so many women who run small businesses and support their family with that extra money, right? That for the camps and the stuff and the fuel in the car and whatever, gone, no respect. And sadly, like pathetically, sadly, no apology from anybody in government.
No.
Nothing.
Or even recognition. I mean, we're talking about some of these women have been out of work for 6 months. Like 6 months is a long time, right? And so their businesses are devastated, and small business in general, if that's not a red flag, I don't know. Like, Walmart's booming, Amazon's booming, all these big companies are booming. Where is small business? And small business employs 50% of the people in the US. So collectively, us as small businesses are employing 50%. That's going away. That is going to change, right? Everyone's going to be fleeing for these big companies, and that's all that's going to be left. If that's not a big red flag that something's going on here, I don't know what is.
Yeah, and I think that's why the tides will turn very quickly on public health officials once the public wakes up to the fact that they knew, like Bonnie has known for 20 years, if you lock down a country, you're going to ruin its economy. This isn't something that they're all like, oh, we had no idea what was happening. They weigh these decisions, these cost-benefit analyses all the time with public health. What can we do so we don't?
Right.
And I would love to ask the previous public health officer, Dr. Perry Kendall, who was a real hero in Vancouver he opened the safe injection site. That was his doing. Some very progressive, interesting stuff, whether he believes that we should have been locked down. And I bet you he would say that the economy should never have been locked down, because the collateral damage is far higher than any virus could have caused.
How can anybody just discount Sweden and their results? Like what?
And that's the media.
Right.
That's the media.
Right. We don't, I mean, this is what just drives me nuts, is that not only are we dealing with a 99% survival rate, right, with a 0% child death rate, right? Not only are those the numbers, but here, let's even look at this. A whole other country who did not do what we did has way better results. I mean,
and other countries too, right? Lots of countries. Well, that's why I hope that this awakening will be, thank God it's now. Thank God it's not over the next 20 years and we slowly become enslaved. Thank God they chose to be so big and so harsh, because the world has changed forever. And once the real awakening does happen, every time David Icke gets out there to 35,000 people, those people will be awake forever.
Right.
That at least let's be grateful that it is happening now. It is finally happening now, because we knew things were amiss. Yeah. So let's be grateful for it's our time. It's our time now to awaken, and let's do that.
That is true. And this opens opportunity for a huge shift in education as well. I mean, I don't know anybody that's perfectly happy with their education system. Most parents have gripes and complaints, right? Nobody's walking around saying, oh, I just think everything's perfect. My kid's learning exactly what they need to learn. They're fully prepared. No, most people are like, I'm going into debt to send my kid to college, and I don't know why.
Well, I think we can maybe talk about this another time, because this is a whole other concept, but I woke up in the middle of the night when I have my best thoughts, and realized that what's going on now is a cultural economic shift, the way that we have seen with like the sharing economy, how the world goes through waves of economic trends, right? Industrial revolution, green revolution, whatever. So this whole sharing economy of like Uber and Airbnb, and
Mm,
essentially is dismantling older, bigger monopoly systems and offering a more democratic way to solve that problem in
right,
theory, like whatever you think about Uber, but let's just say that the sharing
right.
economy.
It's kind of a gig
And
economy, right? It's
yeah,
more
and that
contract labor.
we're going to literally change an industry.
Yep.
So Uber and Airbnb, they're
Hmm.
changing hospitality and what's it called, tourism or
Yep.
leisure, whatever, transportation.
Hmm.
And I think what we're at the beginning of, and this is what people could focus on to be hopeful, is we're at the beginning of changing the industry and the concept of government. And we have an opportunity now to radically alter it and hugely shrink it, because I don't need the government at all. I
No.
need a driver's license and I need a passport.
Yep.
I don't need the government for anything else. I'm quite happy. That's how I live in Africa.
Yeah.
And maybe that's what we're going to be able to do, is essentially force them out of our lives because they're such a
Yeah.
failure. And we
Right.
will build, if I build my school and you build whatever you're building,
Hmm.
that they're going to become, what's the word, when something's not needed anymore?
Obsolete.
Obsolete. Yeah,
Yeah.
in some way. I mean, there'll always be
Yeah.
borders and shipping and air and airspace, but I think that we could actually focus on that and get them out of all these things we don't need them involved with anymore. And that it will just
Yeah.
happen naturally because of this, because people like me, entrepreneurs like me, are going to be creating and designing new solutions that don't involve the government. Like I
Yeah.
have a school model that I'm designing and I want it
Yeah.
100% government free. I don't even want the
Yes.
certificate from the government. Why?
Yeah. Why?
Why
Why?
do I need the
Do you know
government?
Harvard takes a higher precedence to homeschool kids anyway?
Wow, that's interesting. Okay, I'm going to call them. That's a good little piece of research. Yeah.
They
But
actually take the
why do we have them involved?
yes, because the theory I think is that these homeschool kids have kind of l- have a different thinking about things because they've come up through a different type of exposure. So they
Yeah,
actually give precedence
yeah,
to looking at a homeschool kid. Doesn't mean they're going to get
interesting.
in for sure, but it makes them
Yeah,
perks their interest and they want to know more about this kind of kid.
yeah, yeah.
So it's very
Nice.
intriguing. Yeah, it's very intriguing. And to me, all learning is self-learning anyway. I don't care how much you sit me down and force me to learn algebra. It's not going to happen probably because it's not
Mhm.
the wanting is not there. I don't have a I
Yeah,
you can put your kid in front of something they want to learn and there's no issue, right? They can't get enough of
yeah,
it. And we're all like that. We're all like that. And so
yeah.
this kind of shift in education, I want to hear about your Rome school, because it's fascinating to me because it sounds like, you're talking about travel and exposure and really more integration, when it comes to schooling kids.
Yeah, definitely. And it's early, early stages, but I know I'm onto something. A lot of people are interested, whether I can do it or not. And I certainly won't do it alone. But if I could find a partner and get some real money, I'm sure I could build something. And it's more like the how we live before 9 o'clock and after 3 p.m. and all afternoon and all evenings and all weekends. That's how
Yeah,
we educate our children when they're not in these buildings.
right.
So it's just a matter of making it that way for their school hours as well. And some parents will want to be the teachers and some parents won't. So, how does that work economically?
Right.
But the statistics say that the child really only needs a couple of hours a day of good quality learning.
Mhm.
So, that's what I'm starting with.
Mhm.
And just listening to people and hearing what they want. And this is a great time. There's always, when everything seems impossible, that's always the moment where something really radical does become possible. So we'll
Sure.
see starting next few weeks when I'm sort of focused on more back to school and I'll build it out a little bit what's going to happen. I want to approach a company called Tata, which is an Indian company that owns Range Rover and Land Rover. It's a
Uh-huh.
big Indian vehicle company, to see whether I could actually get a big company as a partner, because it's a vehicle based school and I need the vehicles to be with the children for 4 hours a day, 6 kids in each vehicle. And if I could get Range Rover as a partner, then I'm sure I could get all the parents that I need to
Yeah.
make the business model work.
Yeah, that's awesome. I can't wait to hear more about that because that's definitely always been my
Yeah,
vision for education with my kids is educating them through travel and bringing in new ideas and movement too, because particularly boys,
Yeah,
I don't feel are designed to just sit in a seat all day. I mean, many
I
girls
know.
aren't either. I know
Well,
it's not.
how does this feel if we picked your kids up? But my Rome school would pick your kids up at 8:15 in the morning. Give them some food if they haven't eaten much, and you'd get them back at around 12:30 or 1 o'clock, and so
Yeah,
their school would be done in that
done.
amount of time.
And that's
And
all
I
you
think
need.
that's
That's
pretty
what I do.
doable for a lot of parents.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what we do, 8 to
So
12.
I'll let you know how that goes.
Yeah, I can't wait to hear more
Yeah,
about
my
it.
my little handle is well, my handle is it's not free government education, it's government free education.
I like that. I think there'd be a lot of people on board with that. I tell you, especially with
Yeah,
all these new
yeah.
messages they're indoctrinating our kids with, it's pretty gross. So I think a lot of people would be
Oh,
right onto that. So
yeah, I feel for the families who have to send their kids back or who wanting to, because I think they're gonna be in for a major wake-up call.
yeah, I wanted to ask you to see if you knew anything about it because I've heard a couple of things now about quarantining in kids in schools back east, particularly that there's been a construction company that has been working on building in quarantine facilities to the school, and a lot of parents are just being told we don't know yet. We don't know yet. You know, so I want to just kind of
Oh,
plant that out.
totally.
Yeah, I want to
Oh,
plant that out there, that
well,
idea that, this is a possibility that they could be testing for the virus without your consent, possibly in the school, and what that might look like, and if they would quarantine in school for 14 days, like how far is this going to go? Because I know here in the States they already have the iPads where they're temping kids to go into different rooms. So you stick your face in the iPad and it temps the kid. So those are in schools here. I know
wow.
that. Yeah. And
Okay, I
that's
don't well, since I decided to revolt, I don't know. I haven't actually been paying attention other than some articles that people send me, but a police officer told me, a Vancouver police officer, very high level, that I contacted when I was organizing the marches to make sure everything was cool and trying to get some inside information, mostly on if arrests would happen. I said, under this new emergency, since we're all under emergency orders, what's the deal with arrests? Because it's legal to lawfully protest. And so we have rights to do that. And he looked at me and he said, Sue, we're literally building the plane as we're flying it right now.
mm,
And they can't say much. Nobody can
right.
say much right now. And it was kind of a message. And I was like, they have no idea. And so I think we all have to be aware of that. They actually don't know. They're not going to know. We're really not going to know until maybe June, until one full school year does complete.
Pass by. Right.
Yeah, so that's why I thought I'll take my kids out for a year and maybe forever, but at least 1 year,
Yeah.
and let them do whatever and make a mess. And if it never goes back to normal, we won't go back, and I'll just watch and see what happens. But I think around mid-October, something really tragic is going to happen. Someone's going to get hurt. An ambulance is going to show up at a school, or a lawsuit's going to happen, and the schools may be shut down again because of the liability. They may just not want to do anything because it's
Yeah.
just these are children and small children. I think the whole thing's just going to be a total disaster, personally.
Yeah. What are your feelings on this second lockdown? Do you see it coming?
Well, yeah, I believe that there is a plan in place. Some people think that BC may avoid it because our activism is so strong.
Oh, good.
But I think that, well, Bonnie, as the architect, she will try. And I've already started seeing stories like, oh, there's a teacher that has been tested for COVID now,
Yes.
and
Yeah. That's what we're seeing here
more
right now.
cases.
Yeah.
Yeah. So whether that's why I think these mandates, the mask mandates, are going into place. I think these companies are being paid off for accepting financial losses. I think they're saying to them, okay, we will allow you, we won't force in these lockdowns and these measures if you do this, this, and this. And one of them is mandatory masking, because it's a fraudulent policy. So it's there for another reason.
Yeah.
And I think all of these big companies are getting on board because there may be a second lockdown being negotiated.
Mhm.
And this is the price they're going to pay for being able to stay open.
Yeah. Interesting to me that you brought up, the pharmaceutical tie with the education system. Recently here in Colorado, one of our school districts was found on a donor list that had paid $48,000 to a lobby firm to pass a legislative bill here in Colorado, SB 163, that removes personal exemption from vaccines and tightens up any
Yeah.
kind of exemption. So the school
Yeah.
district paid to support that. And to me, it doesn't stop there. Just the way I'm thinking about it, the school board's not giving up 48K to just for, the safety of the children when we have like a 96% participation rate in the immunization program here. That's not why they're doing that. They're getting offered something on the back end, right?
Yeah. 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 It's all business and politics. Absolutely. And we're not just talking about a couple of small schools here.
No.
There's 500,000 kids in K to 12 in BC, 2 million tertiary, that's university in Canada. The money, the profits, the shareholding, the business deals, like Canada is a huge pharmaceutical industry now. We have a huge pharmaceutical industry. It's big business. It's $12 billion a year in revenues. It's 30,000 employees. So there's sludge to that. There's the corruption sludge of the industry to that. Naomi Klein, who's one of our great democracy kind of thinkers and writers, she calls it disaster capitalism. There's so much profit in corruption.
Yeah.
There's no profit in justice, really.
Right. And that's one thing maybe going back to the belief system, like what are you and I have really to gain for speaking out like this, or people like us? Like we have a whole lot more to lose by bringing this up, right?
Yes and no, because when you're awake like we are, it's like you're just on a different plane anyway. I have my peace of mind to lose. I have my sanity to lose. I have my conscience to lose if I didn't fight.
Yeah.
And if I was not an awake person, then I would feel that, I've got too much to lose.
Yeah.
But I've got way too much to lose by accepting all of this on a human level and my family level. So for me, it's more of a matter of walking through the raindrops and thinking, okay, how can I get some wins? How can I make some money? How can I just get my life back to normal as much as possible and survive this? And I do believe that when people accept tyranny, it makes my life harder. Like all these women that were yelling at me at the store because I wouldn't put a mask on. I'm like, if they only knew that they're violating my human rights just because they are complying. But you can't have a conversation like that with people who are advocating for tyranny. They won't.
It's completely based in fear.
Yeah.
It's completely based in fear.
They might, if it was a different topic, if it was about, say, organic food or safety of a car or something that means that they're really passionate about. But again, this is an industry that so few people understand viruses and vaccines and infectious diseases. So they're just going with what they're being told to do.
Right. Well, on that note, we'll wrap up here because I've kept you long enough, I think. But I want you to let us know where we can connect with you. I know that you're kind of shifting and you're going to be much more out in the public and dealing with people face to face, because that is the most strongest connection that you can make, for sure. And we all need to do that.
That's where my focus is going.
Yeah. But where can they connect with you?
Okay, so always on my Susan Standfield, and there's a D in the middle, Facebook page. I try and get 5 to 10 stories up a day. I'm like Netflix for people who binge on justice. So I say, I just pump it out. I know it works. I just pump it out, and people see things at different times of day. My health and justice brand, which is my focus, is a website. So it's healthandjustice.site. And then now there's a new Instagram, Health and Justice on Instagram. So my Susan Standfield Facebook page works because there's just a lot of content I can get out on Facebook, but I'm trying to move towards like a Brian Rose, David Icke kind of platform where everything is slaved from my website. But that has to be built out in the next 6 months. So that's where I'm headed. And I've got a new campaign that I designed called Disobey. And this is about getting women to do what people like I do, or maybe you do, which is literally, and this site was inspired by David Icke, by his speech. You can tell him that we all just start saying no.
Yes.
In peaceful, respectful ways. And if millions and millions of us do that, we'll make this go away. So that's going to be out there. It's called Disobey. And my Rome School. I'll be focusing on the Rome School.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Susan, for all the work that you're doing. Thank you for shining your light and knowing that you deserve your individuality and not being afraid to get out there and model that for others so that they can do the same.
Yeah, well, it's an honor. And in parting, I would say to everybody, the key is being respectful and being
Yeah.
compassionate. People will always listen if you approach it from that. The craziest idea they will listen to if we come at it from a place of being respectful and compassionate. And that's what the world needs most right now. So thank you for having me and being a new media voice. This is what we need the most.
Thank you. And thank you for being on the Naturally Inspired podcast today.
Okay, see you soon. Thanks again. Bye, everyone.
If the Naturally Inspired movement makes sense to you, let's do this together and transform the medical model and help people take charge of their health. Learn more about how you can join the Naturally Inspired movement by going to naturallyinspiredadvocate.com or call me at 970-475-4862.